Nora, do you want to, are you recording this? Did you start recording this yet, Nora?
Yeah, I think it started.
Awesome, great. Just wanted to double check before I get into it. Anyway, welcome to our presentation called Wait, I Can Do That, about enrollment management, judicial affairs, and other lesser known functional areas. To introduce myself, my name is Maggie Freed. I am a second year in NYU's Higher Education and Student Affairs Master's Program, and I am also the graduate assistant working in NYU's Office of Student Conduct.
And hello, everyone. My name is Nora, and I am also a second year full-time student in the higher education program at NYU, and I currently work for the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, specifically working with the Community College Transfer Opportunity Program. And I did want to note that today we're going to be talking about student affairs functional areas, but I do want to make note that not all of these fall under student affairs, right? There's that distinction between whether or not certain functional areas are under student affairs or just under higher ed overall. So when we do say student affairs and or functional areas, we do mean functional areas in higher ed in general. So here's just an overview of everything we hope to cover in this session. This is just a brief overview. It's going to be a brief overview of different functional areas that we're going to be diving into, but we won't be able to get into explicit detail about every functional area, just in the interest of time, of course, but we do hope to give you a solid picture of various functional areas that you may or may not know much about.
So these are just kind of things that we hope that you do take from this section. We want to really give you an awareness of different functional areas, such as enrollment management and student conduct, and how they contribute to the overall mission and success of student affairs divisions or departments, as well as how your personal beliefs and values may impact or tie into the functional area that you might be interested in working in. Also, we hope to kind of touch on why institutional type and size, as well as the level of student interaction, is important in kind of assessing these functional areas and how those aspects may impact your interest or lack of interest in those areas.
All right, so first, we want to just start off with a little bit of a personal reflection, and don't mind those two first little tests. We were just testing it out earlier and we couldn't figure out how to erase them, but anyway, we just want to start off by asking you all why you're interested in working in student affairs or higher education as a whole. So you can text into your search bar, put it into your search bar, pollev.com/NoraBelhaj051, or you can text NoraBelhaj051 to 37607, and then you can put your number in, your answer in there, and then it will appear on the screen. All right, so our first answer, I love watching the development of others and helping them grow. This is such a crucial time in a student's life where we can make a difference. I'm guessing it cut off the rest of that. I'm sure there's just like a certain number of characters. But yeah, that's an awesome point. I feel the exact same way. This is a very important part in a student's life. And you know, the people that work within the university really help guide a student in their journey. Having supportive people in the background doing that for them. So yeah, definitely. Be a part of social change in one of the most, oh no, it kept going. Okay, I can go back here.
I'll scroll.
Oh, thank you. um, be a part of social change in one of the most influential institutions in the world, to help the development of students and also work to run a successful institution with all the different services provided to students. I love working with students and being a guide and support system for them through their higher ed experience. I love the transformative development that comes from supporting students and the field also being so collaborative and team-centered. To be a support for others in this time, in this key time of development as someone who's experienced it. Yeah, so we see like a very common theme here of just wanting to be able to support students, being passionate about being there for students and such. That's awesome. I've been able to grow so much working with student affairs professionals as an undergrad, and I want to do the same thing for students in this field. Awesome. Loved all of these answers. They're really great, pretty evident that there's a genuine care for students and their experience.
So now we're going to give just a brief overview of our respective functional areas and talk a little bit about how our personal values tie into the work that we do.
So when thinking in the context of student affairs, as a career, people already think, I had no idea that this was even a career path that I can take. And within that, those already in the know of the field end up not even knowing about the many functional areas that they can even pursue. The umbrella of enrollment management being one of them. So we often look past these functional areas because they aren't your typical student affairs functional areas. In some cases, one might argue that enrollment management is its own separate entity and not under that student affairs umbrella. So I do want to start off by giving you all an overview of admissions at NYU, because that's where I work. And the admissions team at NYU serves 10 traditional undergraduate schools, colleges, and programs in NYC, as well as the campuses of NYU Abu Dhabi and Shanghai. They have a dedicated staff of admissions counselors stationed around the world, as well as a marketing and communications team and operations team headquartered in New York City. Their staff serves both degree-seeking and visiting students. Their mission is to engage and enroll talented, dynamic, and diverse students who thrive at NYU and beyond. Maggie, you can go to the next slide. So here are just a very few examples of positions that are under the undergraduate admissions team. And I also just want to make note that the admissions team I work for is only for undergraduates. Because NYU is so complex, the specific schools under NYU have their own designated admissions office that focuses on, let's say, graduate or PhD admissions work. But in other institutions, they could be all comprised into one, right? So it's important to note that different institutions have like different structures in terms of their offices. So under the admissions team, they have positions like Assistant Director of Admissions. This is considered an entry-level position. In a different institution, you might see Admissions Counselor. They're both at the same level, both entry-level, just different positions, different names for the positions. And then we have the Director of Global Admissions Evaluation and Strategy. This person kind of just focuses on the strategic mission of the office and how to kind of evaluate and make sure that everything is kind of in order and working for everyone in the office as well as for the students. Senior Associate Director for Diversity Initiatives, Director of Admissions, which oversees the entire department. And there's a Director of Admissions in Abu Dhabi and also for Shanghai. So there's 3 of those positions. There's also Director of Recruitment and University Relations. And this person focuses directly with assigning areas for recruitment for different counselors and just making sure that the recruitment strategies for the office is working for everyone. And then lastly, the Senior Director for Pipeline Programs. These are just a general example of different positions. There are obviously much more in our office, but these are just small little examples. So next I'm going to briefly touch upon different areas under enrollment management very briefly. We have institutional research, which is considered under enrollment management, which is, I believe, a highly overlooked functional area in higher ed. The NYU's Office of Institutional Research and Data Integrity are a group of analysts and statisticians. They're experts who are trusted with the responsibility of strategically, accurately, and consistently reporting on NYU activities to external and internal audiences. So this office is pretty much here to support the university in providing appropriate data, numbers, and figures to those who request it. So it's pretty much like a powerhouse of providing important data to the university. Next is financial aid. I'm not going to go over too in depth of what financial aid does. Yes, go financial aid. But you do have to deal with tough situations in this field. But what I do want to quickly touch upon is something that's under financial aid at NYU called financial education, which they provide financial programming for students, right? So like financial literacy tools, presentations on financial literacy, because a lot of students don't understand their financial aid package. So it's important to be part of that process of being able to give students that information on here's how you understand your financial package, your financial aid package. So that's an interesting piece of financial aid at NYU, the Department of Financial Education. Then we have the registrar and the bursar, and these two areas in student affairs and higher ed are pretty much really behind the scenes and considered non-student facing. And the university registrar, for example, is there to protect and preserve academic records of students. It can be student facing when they have to meet with a registrar counselor, for example. And some positions include a university registrar, an assistant vice president for student information systems, director of student information systems, and associate registrar. Bursar department kind of works the same way, except they deal with the billing, collecting, refunding, cashiering functions at the university. And staff is available to assist students and parents with activities that deal with paying with their bills and other financial services. And this is very non-student facing as well, but again, sometimes you might need to meet with a bursar counselor if you need to pay off something. Some positions, for example, can be a director of student accounts in data integrity, a director of student accounts in operations, loan servicing, collections officers, etc. Next is opportunity programs. Most of you should be familiar with these kinds of programs, as NYU isn't the only university that houses these programs. So you have things like HEOP, C-STEP, STEP, or BEST. And these are innovative pre-college enrichment programs in science, technology, engineering, math, and other professions. And they serve students by providing a means for traditionally underserved low-income students, which can include academic and personal counseling, financial aid counseling, mentoring, academic workshops and seminars, or tutoring. So this is a very good area to work with if you're interested in access, for example. The Office of Student Success is also another interesting department under enrollment management and works very closely with opportunity programs. They are designed to build and nurture connections within the entire NYU community while also being strategic in building student success initiatives on campus, specifically for individual students to make sure that they're successful on campus. And some positions include student success specialists, director of student success initiatives, communications and training specialists, director of operations, etc. And then lastly, I'm going to touch on marketing and communications and graduate marketing and admissions consulting. So the marketing communications team, they're a very interesting team. I really like the work that they do. They combine the power of storytelling and empirical evidence to promote university values and processes to students and lead them through a student life cycle. And some positions include assistant director of digital communications, assistant director for visitor relations and special events. So this is an area that if you're very interested in being very creative, this is also a way you can support students, right? Getting out that important information to them in a pretty way. while also using that storytelling factor. And then lastly, the graduate marketing and admissions consulting team. They support the enrollment goals of more than 350 graduate and professional degree programs in over 18 graduate professional schools, colleges, centers, institutes. They really help prospective graduate and professional students navigate and discover available university programs through online tools, personal frontline customer service, things like that. And then they also promote collaboration within the university and between schools to serve the institution's enrollment goals. So I know that was like a handful, a lot, a mouthful, but these are just an idea of what constitutes an enrollment management umbrella at a university. And again, this is at NYU specifically, and this may look different at other institutions, but for the most part, this is like a general sense of what functional areas are under enrollment management.
So now I'll talk a little bit about student conduct and community standards. Another name that it also typically goes by is judicial affairs, but specifically in the context of NYU, I'll talk about it as student conduct. It's not necessarily an umbrella unit like enrollment management. However, we do have numerous partnerships across NYU that I think a lot of people don't necessarily connect to something like student conduct. And so essentially where there are students, there needs to be some type of student conduct assistance. And so you might recognize some of these departments like that we work with, like residence life with residential student conduct, the Center for Student Life with student organization conduct, and Title IX with instances like sexual misconduct. But there are also other offices that we work with to enhance the student experience and ensure the safety of the community. Public safety is comprised of individuals that think critically about the ways that we provide safety and security to the community. The Office of General Counsel is a team of lawyers that work to protect the institution and ensure sound decision-making in all areas and operations of the school. And then study away student life professionals operate with academic units at study away sites and provide a home away from home for these students who are studying abroad in this new place, and give students structured experiences outside of the classroom. Other pieces to think about in terms of student conduct, conflict mediation and restorative justice are two big content areas that kind of fall into our work. We help to give students the tools to resolve conflict in an appropriate and mature way, and also help students understand the harms of their actions on themselves, but also the wider community. And so I think oftentimes, you know, as we saw in our poll everywhere earlier, a lot of people get into student affairs because they want to help students. But I think it's also really important to think about the ways in which you want to help students. And so for me, I'm someone who also is really passionate about student development and the learning that takes place outside of the classroom. And so naturally, you know, I kind of fell into residence life initially because I think that's what a lot of people jump to. But for me, I found that I really enjoy helping students develop personally and make them more responsible citizens and help them understand how the decisions that they make don't just impact them, but impact the people around them in the wider community. And so that's kind of how I fell into student conduct as my the functional area that I'm really passionate about. And so just to touch on other areas that Nora and I feel do really great work, but sometimes or maybe they go unnoticed or kind of misunderstood. Athletics and veteran affairs are very similar in that you work with specific subpopulations of students, so student athletes or student vets, and provide specialized programming or advisement as they navigate their unique experiences. So this might look like academic advising, career advising, really just providing resources that can help students as they navigate their college journey. Recreation, I think, is another one that goes unnoticed. They coordinate group activities for students, as well as wellness activities and programs. In order to enhance the mental and physical health of students. There's a lot of research out there that talks about how important it is to get students active, and recreation, I think, really helps in that area. Assessment, I think, is really critical in student affairs. We have so many programs and events and operations that occur at an institution at various levels. And so it's critical to think about how effective these things are. And if they're not effective, how can we enhance them and make them even better next time? And so assessment really allows us to better understand the impact of the decisions and actions that are made by a department, an institution, or just like an office. Academic support staff essentially is just student affairs professionals that work within a specific academic unit, so a school or an academic program. This also can include professional schools like medical school or law school. Those types of schools have specific student affairs units that work with that subpopulation. And they essentially just support the students in terms of professional and personal growth. And then lastly, alumni affairs work with students that are alumni that have already graduated. And they help, alumni affairs professionals help keep the students connected to their alma mater, and also provide career development opportunities for current students. So bringing the alumni back on campus as a means to give alumni the opportunity to talk about their experiences in their respective fields. And so I think you'll notice that a lot of these areas have similar goals, right, of supporting students. And so it really kind of speaks to the different ways that you can support those students, kind of like I had touched on earlier. And I think this also speaks to the transferable skills, right, that you can gain when you work in these various areas. And so if you wind up working in a general area like residence life, you can gain specific skills that you can transfer to different areas as your values and interests change.
So now I just want to pretty much ask you all, just to create a little bit of a discussion here. Why do you think these areas are not as well known? And we can also leave this as a rhetorical question as well. And we'll touch upon details later on in the slide of why we think these aren't well known. But I definitely want to hear from you all. Feel free to use the chat box, or you can unmute yourself. I definitely want to get like a little bit of discussion in here and to see what you guys think. And why these areas are not as well known.
If I could just go, but I was just thinking exactly what you were both saying, like res life and orientation are like the flashy parts of higher education. So that's like the first thing that people see. And like, I'm guilty of that. Like I'm an RA, I'm an orientation leader. But then once you get into it, like that's why I'm in this session, because you understand that you can help students in every which way, and they need that support from like all around, like a circle. So I think as you get deeper into it, you realize that everything is important.
All right, that's an excellent point. And you think about it because like res life, orientation programs, first year programs, like they're fun. They're fun things. And you know, you don't automatically think like I want to work with finances or data or I don't know, whatever the other back end work that's there. So that's a good point. You see someone wrote something in the chat. Not all students may see these areas if they're more behind the scenes, plus there aren't as many student leader roles in some other areas. Yes, exactly. You tend to kind of see what other people are doing and tend to follow that, right? Rather than try to look for something yourself. I think I heard someone who wanted to say something. I'm sorry if I cut you off.
Quickly, I was just going to add that a lot of these departments aren't places that students want to go as their first point of contact. So you think conduct, and we don't realize the value of conduct until we've seen the theory behind it and seen the transformation behind it.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. And you know, like you think about this career as something that's like fun and exciting to do. So that's why you look at these as res life at orientation. But something like student conduct, for example, which is a very integral part of a university, you know, when something goes wrong in the university, who deals with that, right? There's someone there to deal with that. Or if you have a question about your financial aid, so, you know, there's someone there So it's like, you can do that too. It's not just about programming. It's not just about, making the fun things. So yeah, it's great. If no one has anything else to say, I guess we can go ahead and move on. So another important thing to consider is the level of student involvement required for certain functional areas. So many people think that student affairs requires constant student interaction, which is not necessarily true in all cases. Functional areas fall on this spectrum of student interactions, where some interact with students more than others, and somewhere in the middle. So here are just some examples set on a spectrum. And as you can see here, there are a variety of functional areas that provide for various levels of student interaction. Now, this isn't an exact science, but in general, this is an overview of what functional areas do in relation to students. When I was an undergrad, I got involved on campus, like a lot of current student affairs professionals, which is how I decided I wanted to pursue a career in this field. And I had worked in career services, wellness programming, and academic advising as an assistant. But one thing I never thought about was a career in higher ed that focuses on the back end work. And because I'm a wholehearted introvert and honestly have no idea how I'm here talking to you all today, I decided why not try something a little bit out of my comfort zone, something that I'm not used to, something that might be different. And in turn, I received this assistantship at NYU working for a community college transfer opportunity program. And I remember my time working in career services, I had a lot of student interaction and it gave me anxiety, I'm not gonna lie. And I think that's what plays into that point of me being an introvert and what I believe in my values are, and having some student interaction, amazing, but also having that time to not have too much student interaction is also good. So that's how I was able to figure out like what areas I was interested in. So for student facing, for the most part, they're well known, right? These areas. But there are other student-facing areas that aren't well-known, like student conduct, for example. In student conduct, you can work with students in certain circumstances, like when they need counseling or when they need to meet with someone in student conduct. If there's some weird noise in the background, I am so sorry about that. It's also about what you think is a fit for you in terms of your career.
And so like Nora had mentioned, even if an area isn't necessarily student-facing, it doesn't mean that they don't support students. And so for example, something like fiscal affairs, where you're managing budgets fund programs and events that encourage student involvement. Or something like procurement, which is responsible for obtaining and managing property in an institution. It allows students, faculty, and staff to have comfortable and productive environments that are conducive to work and learning. So even if you're not necessarily student facing, it doesn't mean that you don't do really important work. And I think another thing to mention is that, like we had said before, this isn't an exact science. So we can't promise that if it's not student facing, you'll never come in contact with a student. But it's important to just kind of understand that these non-student facing functional areas, they tend to be more big picture. They tend to support a department or an institution as a whole. And understanding this dichotomy can be really important for people who want to work in higher ed and student affairs, but might not be interested in working with students constantly. And so we want to take a second and recognize that a majority of our experiences, Nora and I's experiences, stem from our time at a large, private, urban institution in New York City. But we acknowledge that functional areas are going to look very different depending on the type of institution as well as the size.
Before I move on to this part, I just want to make a note on what Maggie said earlier. Based on what institution you choose, whether or not you're going to have more student interaction as opposed to no student interaction. And that's why it's important to go on informational interviews to learn more about certain positions in certain departments, in certain institutions, so you can kind of get that feel of whether or not this position in this institution specifically has that level of student interaction or non-student interaction. So it's really up to you, where you want to work, or what you feel comfortable with. So in general, regardless of where you work, student affairs professionals are committed to supporting the academic mission of their institution. And this is just a quote from Joan Hurt from her book, Where You Work Matters. And it's a very great book. I definitely advise you all to get it and read it if you haven't already. I know it's a very introductory book for certain programs in grad school. But it's important to be a part of an institution in which you support their academic mission, but also how your values tie into that mission. So the commitment professionals make to support the academic mission of their institution is one of the enduring characteristics of the student affairs profession. So being able to tie your values and beliefs into the academic mission goes hand in hand with choosing where you want to work and where you fit.
And so kind of going on that same line, different institutions, the student affairs professionals that work there tend to take on different roles, if you will. And so now we're going to kind of touch upon a few different types of institutions and how the student affairs work kind of aligns with the mission and vision and overall work environment of the institution.
So these are just 4 examples of a type of institution that you may work at. There are others, but just for the sake of time and space on the slide, we just put 4. So the first is a liberal arts institution. And according to Joan Hurt's book, they have earned that label of being called the standard bearers. And it's because that the fundamental standard of being a student affairs professional is promoting development among the students. So liberal arts institutions, student affairs professionals within those institutions focus on the holistic growth of students. So that's like a very main part of their mission. As specialists, research universities are highly competitive and have a specialized culture, which is why they have that name for them. And the specialization that permeated the research institution generates an environment that is highly decentralized. Because the size of these institutions are so large, it creates a siloed effect amongst offices and departments, which creates a more specialized student affairs profession. We definitely see that at NYU. It's huge, it's massive. There are departments that don't know that other departments exist. And if they do know that they exist, they could probably have been great collaborators, right? So it's a matter of being able to understand, like, do I want to work at a large institution where it might be decentralized, or do I want to work at a smaller institution where everyone kind of knows each other, everyone works together, kind of thing.
And so the work at community colleges tend to be a little bit more vocational and work related. And so the producers at community colleges are there, really believe in better accessible education for their students. Student affairs professionals at community colleges are typically continuously preparing their students for transfer to a 4-year institution, and will usually acknowledge that their students that they work with typically have a wider range of experiences and needs due to the open door policies of community colleges. And then last but certainly not least, the change agents at Hispanic serving institutions are constantly evolving their work to better serve their students' needs, as well as helping to shape their institution into a more inclusive learning environment. And so to kind of take all this knowledge and apply it to a real life example, using student conduct at 2 very different types of institutions, we have Bowdoin College in Maine, which is a small liberal arts college. So remember the standard bearers, very holistic. Their student conduct is housed under their office of Dean of Students, along with other areas like orientation, international student support, as well as general student advising. Whereas NYU, again, a large research institution, has its own standalone student conduct office with 4 full-time professionals. And so I think it's important to highlight this because if you have a variety of interests, maybe you like the idea of the holistic growth, you might want to look at smaller institutions where you can find more of an interdisciplinary environment, as opposed to larger institutions where functional areas are more specialized and you might find more specific or niche positions.
So just tying back to the beginning of our presentation, we hope that you were able to develop that awareness around these lesser known functional areas. And we hope to have helped expand your mind in choosing a functional area in student affairs if you haven't already. We might have even changed your mind at some point in this presentation, but we also hope that you take into consideration how important it is to tie your personal values and beliefs into your work and the mission of your institution when choosing your preferred functional areas. Of course, the job search is super hard and difficult. You're not going to always end up in the institution that you wanted or a position that you wanted, but that also kind of shows a kind of a learning moment, right? Like you might end up actually liking that area, that functional area or that institution. So you never know unless you try it, really. I had no idea I was going to be highly interested in admissions, for example. It was the last thing on my mind. When I came into the NYU program and I had my interviews, a lot of my interviews were in res life, student life, and this one was in the admissions office. And I was like, why did I get an admissions office interview? You know, because I didn't put that as an interest. But then I ended up loving it. It was literally my favorite interview. And everything else was kind of just like an afterthought. I was like, I don't even want to do any more interviews. I love this. I love this job, like what the job description, what it stood for. And that's how I was able to kind of find myself in what I wanted to do. So definitely try to reach out of your comfort zone, try new things. And even if it means volunteering in an office or doing work study or any of that sort of thing, because it's important to kind of, as a very young professional, to jump around here and there, because you don't know what you like and what you want until you really try it. And that goes for a lot of things in life as well.
All right.
So that's the ending of our presentation. We really hope you guys enjoyed this, learned something from it. We will take questions if there are any questions, or if you guys want to just engage in discussion for the next 10 or so minutes. I believe we have 10 minutes. And that's our contact information. If you want to email us about anything, network with us, we are an open book. We love connecting with people. So feel free to contact us if you want. And I will just leave it open to you all if you have any questions.
Nora, can we stop sharing just in case if people don't want to be recorded?
Oh yes, let me stop the recording.
And I will also